That's a big computer. Hi, I'm Shelby. This is my YouTube channel, Tech Tangents, and I have a data general now. Actually, two data generals. I recently picked these up after finding out that they were available for sale locally, and I did everything I possibly could to get these. I actually had to drive these about 100 miles to get them back home, which really isn't too bad. That was very close for something of this obscure nature, so I'm pretty happy with that, but oh boy, am I excited, because these are definitely not your common computer collectible, and they are super, super cool. So today we're going to take a look at what these are, what I'm going to be doing with them, and yeah, some general information. But before we get too far into this, I'm actually going to go back in time now to before I got this all prettied up, because it took a lot of work to get these transported here. Now, these computers were originally located in Tucson, which is really close to me because I'm in Phoenix, but it still meant that they had to be transported about 100 miles, and I wanted to be as cautious as I could about making sure that they didn't take any damage during that time. So I tried to do as much research as possible before going there on how I should protect these things, and felt fairly confident that I could do it. When I finally got there, I really wasn't able to film anything because it was just one other person and myself who were able to go and pick it up. So standing around with a camera didn't really make a lot of sense because there was a lot of work to do. I did take a lot of pictures though, mostly as reference. I had to disassemble the computers to put them into my van, partially because of the weight. The big cabinet probably weighs about 500 pounds when it's full, and because I wanted to make sure that the hard drives were in the correct orientation when they were transported. I didn't want to turn them on their side or on their face or anything, just in case the change in gravity could potentially do something bad to them. Thankfully, the original owner was very accommodating and gave us all of the time we needed to pack the computer up, and I'm very grateful for that because it made life so much less stressful than knowing we had some kind of hard time limit where we needed to get out. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with how everything was packed for the trip, and I don't think anything took any additional damage from being moved. I'm fairly confident that all of my research paid off, except for one possible thing that we'll look at later. Alright, so since this is currently open, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the specific things that we have going on here, because there's just a lot. So we can better see some of the hardware that's here, and that will make identifying things a bit easier. Now, I do have all of the plates, as you saw. They're just currently sitting on top of this rack, and I will be putting those back on in a bit. So the next step that I need to do right now is reconnect everything so that it is in the condition that it should need to be in when it's used. Now, I'm not going to turn it on, and there are many reasons I'm not going to be turning it on. I'm not going to turn it on in this video. I will eventually, but not in this video, that's for sure. If there's something that's wrong with any one of these parts that are in here and it could potentially damage other parts, I could never forgive myself, because this has the capability of working still, and I need to preserve that as much as possible. And I need to make sure I don't make any mistakes. Now, let's talk about some of the other parts here. So obviously the 8-inch floppy drives. These are all metal. I mean, I don't know if this will get picked up on the microphones, but listen to this. That is a metal door on floppy drive. That's insane. Also, 8-inch floppy drives. I have a box of 8-inch floppy disks that I got up there that came with it. I have somewhere, they're probably up there, some documents that came with this, and included in there is an 8-inch boot disk for this. Now, I haven't really talked about this yet. These, it's difficult to define what is and isn't a computer, but this rack right here is a Micronova. That is one computer. And this rack right here is another computer, a Nova 4X. Now, I'm very happy that this is a Nova 4X. This is the highest configurable memory version of the Nova, and I could potentially max it out to 256K. I'm not 100% sure how much it has in it right now. I think it might be 32 or 64K, or as they would have rated it then, 32 kilowords. Words are a very dumb unit of measurement for memory, but anyway, I think it has 32 kilowords. You can see here that there are cards, so let me just pull out the card here. This is the CPU for the Nova 4X, and wow, and I'm serious, this is just a CPU. There's not like one chip on here that's the CPU. Technically, it's these 4 chips that are the CPUs. It operates 4 4-bit CPUs in parallel to function as a single 16-bit CPU, which is just crazy. One of the cool things about this whole thing, though, and especially the long-term repairability and continued use of it, is that there aren't any chips on here that I've been able to identify that are totally unique one-offs to Data General, except for this chip right here, which I believe is an EEPROM of some sort that contains microcode for the CPU. So outside of that one chip, if any of these others are bad, like say this, what I believe is memory, most likely, if any of those are bad, I should be able to replace them. So there's that, which is very nice. And I'm a little concerned about all of the hand-wired bodge wires on here. As we'll take a look a little bit later in this, I have a binder of service and repair notes that are actually from Data General from this machine. So that may have been stuff that was done during its service contract. But yeah, still concerning to see. This is a hard drive. This is a hard drive. And this is a hard drive. This is going to sound crazy, and I need to double check this with the model numbers that are on the back. I have not recorded exactly what all I have here yet, but I believe this will have a 5 megabyte disk. This will also have a 5 megabyte disk, and this might be 10 megabytes. So there's 20 megabytes total there. And then these 2 drives actually have removable platters. So that's what this is. If I open this up, we can see the platter inside of the cartridge here. And you go ahead and insert that in there, and then you can read the data with it. We'll get into the specifics of why this isn't in there right now, but one interesting side effect of these having removable platters is that I can see the heads right here, and the heads are retracted, which is how I was able to pull this out. This was installed in one of these. And with the heads retracted, I know that they're not damaged. There's actually a little rubber piece here even that separates the heads so they don't bounce into each other. And the thing about these is, so I mentioned that these have removable drives, or removable platters. These have 2 sets of platters. There's a platter underneath of this part as well. You can actually see those heads in addition. So yeah, this is a very complicated computer. Oh yeah, it's the Micronova. Works in much the same way. We have cards here. And each one of these has a different function. So the Micronova seems to be a little better equipped than the Nova 4, and I was told that they used the Micronova more, so that could explain why. But yes, I need to go through, test all of these. Like, it's just a lot of complicated stuff going on here. I will say there's one board in the Nova 4X that is not here that would have been nice to get, but isn't the biggest problem. There was a dedicated multiply and divide hardware math board that was available for this that this was not fitted with. So at some point I would like to try and track one of those down, but none of the stuff is common or affordable, so I don't know how likely that is. But yeah, that's something I would like to do. Okay, now let's see here. Anything else before we get going on? Well, I should talk a little bit more about the terminal. This terminal, this is like the most gorgeous piece of computer hardware I've ever seen in my entire life. This thing is just ridiculous. I mean, the CRT pivots on that hinge. Wow, that is so pretty. I know a lot of people are all about the keyboard, and frankly, I think that's a waste of time and effort to try and get one of these keyboards working. It's just a foam and foil keyboard. I don't think the keyboard's the attractive part of this. I think the keyboard works well with the CRT, but without the CRT, this is just a big, ugly keyboard. Now, there's one cool bit of unique history for this computer in particular, well, this terminal in particular, and that is this. This is a keyboard cover for the Dasher terminal here. And what's cool about that is that there is one. And I mean, there's one of these in the entire world, because the company that formerly owned these was in the textile business, and they made this for their own computer terminal. So it's just really cool to have this Data General branded keyboard cover for the Dasher terminal. And it's the only one. I mean, I'm never a fan of things that are exclusive and impossible to get, but it's cool that they made their own. So I really enjoy that. That's a fantastic piece of history to go with this computer that really summarizes who it was used by. Okay, I think I have covered just about everything I can from the front. So we should probably move on to the back now, where there are a number of other things to talk about. Now, I had the forethought of when these were put in and put down an artificial floor a little bit. It's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood with a piece of carpet over it. So these can actually move. I will have to do a little bit more than just lean on my chair to do it. So I can pull these forward and then I can get behind them. Unfortunately, I have to ever so indignantly crawl underneath my desk to get to the backside. And then both of these actually have a door that swings open to protect the rear side. And I'm going to have to pull these out about 18, 19 inches and then remove the doors and then put them somewhere so I can get to the backside, because the doors open this way, of course. If they opened that way, it wouldn't be a problem, but no, they open the other way. So I'm gonna have to do that, but it's gonna be well worth it. So as of right now, I didn't really cover that. When I transported these, I removed all of the hard drives. Now, I didn't just lock them, I had to remove them because this was going into a passenger van, a consumer grade van, not a like rented van or anything. And in order to be able to load these in, the racks had to be situated on their back. Well, this one didn't end up having to be on its back, but this one certainly did. And I also thought it was important not to change the orientation of the hard drives, that turning them on their side or anything like that could potentially lead to issues. So I didn't want to do that. I locked this drive, pulled it out, put it on there, and just kept it flat the entire time. So I actually removed this hard drive, that hard drive, this hard drive, and the floppy drives. I left the computers inside because they don't have too many parts that are going to be damaged by movement. So I left them in there. I also left this one in there just in case the added structural rigidity in the middle of the case was helpful, because this had to be tipped back and then slid into the van. So that was, I felt, important to do. But yeah, everything had to be removed, which meant I had to undo all of the cables and connections in the machine for the peripherals. And now I'm going to go through and reconnect them. I documented everything to the best of my ability. There were some things that had to be taken out in the heat of the moment because these drives, they're insanely heavy. Seriously, I think they're between 160 and 180 pounds each with the platter removed. And this thing's also heavy on its own. It probably weighs, well, let's hold. Here we go. Stanton Dynaphase 60. This is about 5 pounds. So even that would have contributed significantly. And really the only thing that's in there that has any weight is the platter. So each one of these has a platter in it as well. It was very heavy. So this one I ended up having a bit of an issue with because I didn't know how to remove these. So it turns out none of these are really high up. This one's locked because you can screw it into the front. There's no reason to ever pull this one out, unlike these that have the removable platter. But anyway, this one, you can almost kind of see the rail down here. So these actually rest on the rails and then are screwed in. The screws almost only act as a way of keeping the rails in line with the machine as you pull it out. They physically lay on the rails as you put them in. I didn't know that. I'm used to my modern servers where you're able to undo latches and pull the rails through. And when that didn't work, I had the foolish idea of attempting to remove the rails from the rack while the drive was still installed, because I thought I could pull them through or finagle them in a way where it could come through. Ultimately, that was a fool's errand, and it led to no permanent issues, I believe. Nothing fell or got damaged or anything like that. The top of the floppy drive got a little bit scratched up, unfortunately, but if I can color match this paint, I can go through and correct that, and really you won't be able to see it anyway when it's closed. But the rails, I did save them. They were not damaged in any way, but it just made my life horrible, and I had to unplug some cables that I didn't notice at the very end. Actually, I think that was... No, that wasn't on this, but I don't know. It's just... I need to go through while I have everything in my head about where the cables were plugged in and documented, and the documentation means something to me, because right now I can look at the pictures I took and go, oh, that's here, and know that that's where that cable needs to go back in. I think the orientation of one connector may not have been documented, so I'm going to have to look at that. But for right now, yeah, it's time to get behind these and start taking a look at the cables. Okay, this is going to be kind of rough because the best I've got is an 18mm lens, and I have no space between the wall and this. I mean, here's this light in my hand size, so you can get an idea of what's going on here. So the hard drive, the base hard drive here, has this ribbon cable that's very, very long. It goes down to this card edge, and that starts out by getting wrapped around this piece of plastic up here. I can't push the hard drive forward. But then it connects to this piece here. This gives it enough slack so the hard drive can move forward during service when needed. Down here we have the Nova 4X, and if I pull the power supply to the side here, it's caught on something. What is it caught? Oh, it's zip tied up here. Great, I'll have to cut that. There we go. That was one of the things done for transit to protect it, because this is intended to use some... Come on, there we go. It's intended to use these weird screw retention things, and they don't work great. But anyway, back in here, if I grab that light I showed earlier, you can see that there is the back plane. I have, again, a manually focused camera, and that the connectors are sometimes literally just hand-wired onto there. Actually, this one looks pretty good. The Micronova has some that are hand-wired. But yeah, so those big wide connectors on the back are how the cards are interfaced with. Now, the hard drive card, and I believe, well, both hard drives have these cards over here on the side, and these big wide connectors have to plug into those. That's the internal interconnect, so that you can remove the hard drives with the cables if need be. So I have to reconnect both of those. There is the serial terminal interface board right there, and then down here is the other hard drive. Now, the hard drives are kind of weird, because the hard drive itself is there in that, but then it has this interface board here that the hard drive connects to. I think this converts it to a more standard type. So this is the hard drive interface connector down here. Let's move down that light again, so you can see it off to the left there. I'm guessing that's the standard hard drive interface, and then this is an adapter board to make it work with the Data General disk controller. So there's that. All right, on to the Micronova. Now you can see some hand-wired interconnects in here. Actually, the floppy cable's in the way. Now there's some that are sort of visible. So that's how the Micronova works. The power supply, I believe, is that there. So I'm going to, on both of these, have to take a very in-depth look at the power supply. The terminal seems to be what was connected to this, it looks like, because I believe that cable goes off to the terminals connector. The terminal is a dasher. I'm not sure if it's a D2 or not, actually. I think it might be just a dasher. But it uses this as the interface. It's the EIA connector is what this was using. And that's the keyboard connector. I love the controls for setting the connection information. That's really nice. Okay, now this can be pushed forward. That's the hard drive. I'll widen this out again. This one does also have the interface board, but it's on the back of the drive this time. So you could undo this, and then I think it would swing potentially, but anyway, yeah, that's that. Down here's the floppy drive, and the floppy drive has two individual connectors. Here they are, one for each drive, and I'm going to have to reconnect those. Okay, is there anything else? Oh yeah, so these are weird. So both of these have non-standard power connectors at the base, and there's an internal power distribution system. This one, I believe, takes in 110 and outputs 110 or 120, whatever. All of the power supplies are listed in here as using, come on, 120 volts. So it's the standard US power spec, even though the connector is very strange. I think it was most likely due to the age of, well, the way that the infrastructure would have been built in the buildings when these were released, that the typical US outlets were not capable of carrying as much power. I mean, they could have had aluminum wires, and trying to draw that much current through there would have been a bad idea. So this might have been designed for you to use higher current wiring that was known to be better, and that's why they did that. The other one, though, the Nova 4X case, is using a totally different connector, and this one I believe is 240, so that kind of sucks. So I can't use this. This does have an internal power distribution thing. It's down in there. If I grab that light again, there you can see it. That's standard US outlets, and again, everything on here is just 120. Here we go, the Nova 4. Oh, that one's either. Interesting. Okay, well, the hard drive, there we go, 120. So I'm probably going to bypass the internal power supply on this one, but I might try and get it working on this one. Now, interestingly, if I grab the Micronova back panel here, we can see a circuit diagram of how the internal power supply or power distribution network is wired up. So it should be totally possible to determine what the pinout of that port is and get or make a cable that works with that. So that's really nice. Oh, look, a errant screw down in there. I'll have to figure out what that goes to. So I think that's dark and pretty much everything there is to talk about on the back side here. So I need to go through and reconnect everything, like the hard drive connection, and figure out what's going on. Now, give you a rough idea, of why it's going to take me so long to get this going. Come on, let's focus closer. You see inside of that grate, those are some ridiculously massive capacitors. I'm going to have to take those out and attempt to manually reform those, make sure they don't explode or anything crazy when I try and power this up for the first time. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to be powering this up anytime soon, as there are a lot of those in there. I mean, the hard drive, you can't see it from this angle, has another thing like that, another giant capacitor that is just terrifying. So I'm going to have to really go slowly and test everything one at a time here. All right, now I'm going to get started reconnecting all of the wires. All right, all wired up, and I'm very happy with how this turned out. So this was a bracket, as I mentioned, used to hold this cable in place, and it was originally a zip tie that goes through these holes, but I wasn't as big of a fan of it like that, so I used this cable tie from lttstore.com and a little just twist tie on the loop side going through it. That way it can't go anywhere, and I'm not using the twist tie to hold the cable on. I really don't have an objection to that, but when I did my server video, a lot of people gave me grief about that. There is a second one down here, and this all gives the hard drive enough slack to roll out of the system here. As you can see, it moves out. So that's pretty good. I need to add a little more slack to the power cable arrangement though. One more thing I found that was kind of interesting. So there has been this bundle of cables at the bottom of this, mostly these brown cables, that are just a total nightmare of really poorly done wiring. Not that it was poorly assembled, it's just all kind of crammed inside of here for storage and It's just made my life a little bit more difficult. But I separated out this particular cable because it turns out it's not part of this bundle wire. So one interesting thing here, both hard drive connectors are pinched in this, and the serial connectors here, which is what I believe these are pinched in this one. So these cards must be the interconnect cards for the hard drive controllers and the async card. All of the cables for this one go up to this bundle and then up to the top and then on this one. So that's the top card, which I believe is the async card. So that makes perfect sense. But this cable here is separate and goes to, I believe, the CPU card down here. I almost accidentally pulled this out, which would have been very bad, but at least I photo documented everything, and now I'm video documenting everything. But anyway, I'm gonna guess that is the parallel port, although there are only 3 pins. What on earth could that be with 3 pins? Now that I realize that. That is very, very strange. Okay, well, I will have to investigate that later. I guess I didn't notice that. That's weird. All right, well, anyway, let's see from here from the top. You can get a better look at that giant capacitor in there. But yeah, that's doing good. I got the Micronova all set up correctly. The hard drive's folded back. You gotta unlock it here and push it forward. Now, this is something that I'm really not sure about. Let me grab that light, prop it up in here. Now, the owner said when we were disassembling this that it had to be powered on to be pulled out. Now I'm guessing this gets activated by something inside the compute or inside the hard drive to lift this up, because this comes back and latches on here. You can see the markings on there. So I'm guessing that this is lifted after the spindle stops spinning, so you can remove that platter from inside, and this is used to make sure that you don't do it or don't release it pulled out at the wrong time. Similarly, over here we have a sensor, all right, makes a lot of noise there, that is used to detect when the hard drive is closed, and it goes up against this. I guess they put this tape around there to make it a little bit softer. So that's part of that whole system. So I bet that this is meant to be powered on to be released, but it would be part of a program for like Disk Park, but for data generals. Interestingly, over here, if we look at this hard drive, we have the same release there. Even though these are different model hard drives, turns out this one is a 6095, and this one is either 6045 or 6050, because it's labeled 2 different things. I'm not really sure which one it is. I'm inclined to go with 6045 because that was probably put on by a Data General employee. I don't know the difference yet, so I'll have to look that up. But anyway, somebody plugged the closed sensor with this piece of cardboard. And I don't know if that's just because they are missing the bracket that goes on the rail down here or what, but this one will always think that it is running. Ooh, that needs to be corrected. I don't know if that would have happened because of me or them. Well, I'll investigate that sometime. But anyway, outside of that, everything else is doing pretty good. I'm really curious about this. So this is the back card for the 604550, and on here, as I didn't mention this well, it's on the back of the drive, and this is the cable that goes to it. Now, weirdly, this cable actually goes down to the floppy drive first, and then comes back up to the hard drive. Apparently, the floppy drive goes in the middle. Now, I haven't actually connected the floppy drive yet. I'm gonna have to pull it out on the front, whoops, and do that from the other side. We'll do that in just a moment. But yeah, that's a different thing. So apparently these are daisy chained. I didn't realize that the first time around, because I unplugged the hard drive from here and then unplugged the floppy drives, and it turns out this cable just goes between both directly, which is very, very weird. But yeah, so there's that. Everything else though is fully reconnected. The power supply for the back of the 4, you put in, then you twist the screws, and then it locks in place. So that's nice and managed. But I think that's pretty much it for now. Time to go back to the front, make it pretty, and get the floppy drive reconnected. All right, now before we can call this complete, I've pulled off the side panels for the Micronova here, and we're gonna pull out the floppy drive. Hopefully the cables in the back here, actually I can hold them as I pull this out. I need to reconnect the cables inside the drive here. This point gets a little unplugged. Okay. Disconnected. Hopefully it just pulls out with these 4 screws. I don't remember. But I need to internally reconnect the data lines for this. You have to do this from the front, unlike all of the other drives, which you can access from the rear. Kind of annoying, but whatever. And we'll get to see that pass-through that I forgot about, or didn't realize when I was doing this the first time. I believe that's all of them. Yes, that's fully moving. Come on. Bingo. That's some serious circuit board right there. That is very, very large. Oh, these would be the connectors for the 2 drives. That one's tugging on the circuit board a little bit more than I would like, but oh well, not a lot I can do about that. And you can see that I've labeled this in such a way that I cannot screw up reinstalling these. Now I can put this in again. And then there's one more thing I need to do before buttoning this all up. Okay, now from here, unfortunately this hard drive's slightly misaligned. It's a little higher on this side than it is on this side because I took out the rail screws, but that's something I'll have to look at fixing later. Why is it bowing out? That's weird. Its own faceplate shouldn't bow. Whatever. Alright, not a lot I can do about that. But anyway, I have to put on this rear piece. It was taken off because the floppy drive rubs up against it. And that's bad. So I wanted to make sure it didn't get broken while moving it around, so I had to take it off. Now I'm going to put it back on, and then we can put on all of the remaining trim pieces. Getting close to done now. There are just 6 more pieces that need to go back on. All of them are trim. So let's start off with one of the more important ones, the Nova 4 front panel. Now, all of these front panels just fit right in place. There are little metal latches that keep them on, and then you have to pull on these in just the right way that I haven't quite yet deduced to remove them. There are these little metal things that poke through, but I'm not 100% sure if those are exactly how you're intended to do it, but it works. So yeah, let me go ahead and put this one on. There we go. So that's the Nova 4 front plate, power switch, lock, and then reset and whatever PR load is. I'm not really sure. But we can, yeah, definitely leave that off, even though it's not plugged in. And then we have the fixed disc. Now, unfortunately, the fixed disc has a slight problem. The label is peeling off, which has led to this weird corner. And that happened on the inside. So you can see as I put the plate on, it's all inside that happened. It's very, very strange. But there's those two. The labels are peeling off a bit. This one's expanded. So they've gotten wider and it's poking out in the middle. It's very strange. But then we have the 2 metal blanking panels. One goes up here and the other goes down below. And there we have it, all assembled. Oh wait, 2 more pieces. At the very bottom of the case, as part of the power distribution system, we have these 2 air intake vents down here, and there are dust covers that go over them. This one is slightly broken. There are supposed to be 2 little metal tabs that snap in place. This one's broken off. If only I knew of some way to easily repair plastic. I think I'll do some research on YouTube to see if I can find a way. But anyway, that'll be taken care of later. But for both of these, found something rather hilarious in the documentation when I was going through it originally. So I mentioned I have service records for these computers that are actually from their Data General service contract. It's really awesome. But one thing in particular that I'll get a close-up shot here of is this. Now, this is a note that reads, "Your Data General computer installation site has been inspected by Data General Service Inc., and it is felt for the reasons indicated below, your system's performance may be affected unless corrective measures are implemented. We cannot be responsible for the reliability or serviceability of your equipment." And the reason is under environment, excessive dust and dirt. Now, I don't think I've seen another set of cases quite like these that have these integrated air filters. And if we take one out, we can see that it is indeed very, very clogged. Yeah. There we go. Very dirty. So it was clearly quite an issue for this system. I will pull these out and clean them before putting these on. But yeah, it's just kind of funny that not only is it dirty, I have a letter from Data General saying that it was dirty. Whew, okay, there we go. The setup of the Nova 4X rack and the Micro Nova rack. Now, two things I want to address here very quickly. I'm again not turning either one of these on in this video, or the Dasher terminal. These have been powered off for so long and are just so difficult to replace parts on that if I turned one on and something went bad in it, I might not ever be able to fix it. So I really need to be slow and fastidious in how I do this. Just be extremely careful. Now, another thing, why am I shooting at this really unpleasant angle for these? Well, this room isn't big enough to have the camera in front of these. Matter of fact, if I move my hand off camera, well, just imagine my arm, okay, that arm's length, it's that much more to the hi-fi wall and then the depth of the shelf. So that's it. There's not a lot of space in this room and this orientation. I could have tried to put it that way, but this cabinet is 32 inches deep, so it just eats floor space for breakfast. It's bananas. This thing is huge, but that's a rack. That's how it works. Honestly, I'm a little impressed that it was only 32. I think my other rack, the Shark rack that I did a video on a long time ago, is actually 40. So yeah, it's 70 inches tall. These are not measurements I made. Before I picked this up, I asked for some measurements, so these are the measurements I was given. So it's 70 inches tall. Just for record, I'm 6'2", so there you go. It looks about right on the camera monitor. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So now that the whole thing is assembled, I actually can't pull out the removable platter drives unless I pull it forward and go and latch the back. This drive is actually removable. If I pull off the front panel and undo the screws, there's some cool stuff to see in these, but I don't think this is the video to be doing that in. This is just meant to be a general introduction to having picked up a Nova and give you an idea of what I undid in order to transport this stuff. Matter of fact, actually, I do need to pull this out because I need to unlock the spindle and heads. So let's go ahead and take a look at that because that is very important that I remember to do that. Then this drive is locked in with 2 screws. This is actually the lighter of the 3 drives, being fixed disc. This has 2 platters inside. You can actually see them from the side, which is really, really cool because inside of here, the hard drives themselves are sealed in a piece of acrylic or something. So if you look in these vents, you can actually see the hard drive in there. I don't know what it would take to pull the top cover off. It's got some unusual fasteners. I might have that in my iFixit kit, but yeah, I don't know. Underneath is what we really need to be looking at right now. Actually, I forgot I needed a socket set to get into here. So you just loosen these screws, the bolts actually, then there's some way in the back. There we go. Again, don't remove them. push this all back, and then it will pop out. There is, unfortunately, a fan wired in, so that has to be paid attention to. But from here, we can see some ridiculous capacitors in there, just whoa, and the locking stuff. So the first thing here is the spindle lock. So this will not turn right now because this was engaged, and now the platters actually turn, and we can see the belt here is a fabric belt, thankfully, so that won't go bad. But now we need to unlock the heads, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so like I said earlier, I definitely don't feel I correctly locked the heads, and it's really difficult to tell what's going on in here. So let me cut off this, because that's what I put in there. And now we can kind of start to get an idea of what's going on. So this is the lock. You're supposed to pull this over and put it on this peg here. At least that's what it seems like. But when I try to get this piece all the way over, the plastic bends. Like I was mentioning, it doesn't actually continue to move. So I was concerned if I put it on there, this would snap in transport. So to open this or unlock the heads, push it over here, drop it down, and push it on. There we go. Now the heads should be free. So there we go. That was how I transported the drive. I'm not an expert. That could be wrong, but as far as I know, that was correct. I guess it would help to know what model number drive this is. This is a 6103 if you have to transport one of these yourself. Now, it turned out the bit to take off the bottom screws is actually the same to take off the top. So we can see what's going on in here, and oh man, this is really awesome. So this should actually be held in there, and that should be held in there. It's a little alarming. Those have moved around, but you know, who knows when this was last opened, other than 1982, I guess, is when this drive was made, and it tested with no bad cylinders. That's pretty sweet. But right now, the heads are over the discs. So I'm really curious. Unfortunately, I put that panel back on the bottom. I'm going to try and take that off and then move that lever again to see if the heads move, because they're right there. They're very clearly on the disc. My tripod's at its maximum height, but let me try and move the camera over so you can see that a little better. I guess it could go with a little bit of a cleaning in there as well. Oh yeah, that's very, very pretty. Okay, I'm gonna leave the camera rolling, and I'm gonna take off that bottom panel and move the latch and see what happens. All right, here we go. Grabbed and moved. That doesn't do squat. Well, that sucks. That's really upsetting. Okay, so this went on a 100-mile road trip with the heads over the drive platters. That's great. Well, rotating it, I don't see any damage in the area that they are over. So maybe everything survived fine. I don't know. Alright, this is incredibly difficult to fit me and the camera in here, but if I move that bar, you can see at the bottom, there is a piece of plastic. I'm moving the retention bar underneath, and that's moving with it. Now, I'm not sure what this does, but when I move it all the way over, it goes underneath the label there where you can't see it, but it bumps up against something, and if I pull the label down like I'm going to lock it over that part, it doesn't continue to move, so that gets stuck on the top side. Now, I've also noticed that I can, terrifyingly, but possibly move the stepper that controls the heads. Now, I don't want to move that a lot, like move it out of the way, because I don't intend on moving his hard drive again, but maybe if it was all the way back here, as if the heads had been parked, and the last time this was turned on, maybe then the retention mechanism down here would have worked. So I'm guessing it's because the heads were not fully retracted was the reason that my head thing can't be locked in place. So yeah, I'm gonna have to, oh gosh, it's really difficult to do this blind. I'll do that when I'm underneath, but maybe that's what would be required to get the heads to properly be locked in place. You'd pull it all the way out away from the discs, then do it. Okay, moving away from the fixed disk drive now. Turns out I didn't fully lock in this removable cartridge drive. So let's go ahead and pull this one out. Alright, if I remove the dust cover, down in here we can see the heads. Now importantly, we can see there are 2 heads here, but there's also a second set down there that you can just barely see. And that's how we know there is another platter under here. Oh gosh, I can touch it. Okay. Wow, that is shockingly open. Okay, good to know. I didn't touch the surface, just the edge for reference. So, okay. Now let's go ahead and go through the full cartridge loading this procedure. So here you can see the disc inside the cartridge. You align it so that the hole faces the heads, push it down in, lock it in place, and then wheel it back in. And the alignment on this isn't tremendous, it's rubbing on here. But that's how you would load in a cartridge, and unloading is obviously the opposite. Pull the latch, and it releases. Now, I think this may be magnetic, and we can see there are magnets on the bottom of this. When you put the dust cover on, it just snaps on, and it gets held in place with the magnets, and you can actually push this out and pull this up, and then it doesn't release the magnets, so you can carry it. And there is supposed to be a dust cover that goes over the platter when you have that in there, so I will be leaving that in there. And with that, I'd say we're pretty much done. Now, the obvious question is getting this stuff working. So here's the thing, these are really, I don't want to say they're super complicated, but there's a lot going on in here. Like you saw, there are a ton of giant circuit boards in this thing. There are a ton of, not super giant, but still pretty big circuit boards in that. And that's got a lot of dedicated data general chips in it. And I don't know if those are all going to work, hopefully. But this isn't just your average computer to flip the switch and see what happens. Even the power supplies are going to be tricky because of those monstrously big capacitors. Oh, I should have got a shot of the one under here, because they're so big, man. So I'm gonna have to really go slow, take my time. My plan is, I think first I'm gonna try and get the dasher terminal working, because that'll be a fun thing to have on video that really encapsulates this. It's going to be the most relatable thing for people. Then I can start working on these one at a time. So I'd say my first plan of attack here is going to be to get the Micronova CPU board working. So all I will have to do to pull that out really is actually just unplug that and then wiggle this back and forth. I've done it a couple of times now. There we go. So getting just, for example, this one board to boot is the kind of goal I'm looking at here for starting out. All of this down to just this one board. So to get this board working, I'm going to have to go through and look at the power supply. That's where the real work is on most of these things, because these likely aren't going to have any issues. But the power supplies, I mean, you've got to all be familiar with bad capacitors by now. Imagine capacitors from the 70s. Yeah, so I really have to go through, make sure there's nothing that's catastrophically bad in these, and I just got to take my time. So it's going to be a very long time before we see any of the real interesting parts of this outside of the terminal come to life. And I will be doing videos about the whole process. This isn't going to be one I got it working video. It's probably going to be a large series of videos focusing on each individual part. Like, say, the whole hard drive by itself, or just the CPU card in the Nova 4X, or getting the floppy disk drives working in the Micronova. It's going to be better to compartmentalize each individual project like that, because that's how I'm going to attempt to get these working. So I hope you guys found this interesting. This is a very different computer purchase for a private collector, but I think I am up to the challenge, and I'm really looking forward to it. If you want to support the channel, I am on Patreon, but for now, that's it. There will be plenty of videos coming out about this later. I'll see you next time.